this is our third live moving industry roundtable. Thank you folks for joining once again. My name is Travis Wingate. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Supermove. Our mission is to change the way the world moves. So as mentioned, this is our third roundtable series. And it's I believe our second one this month. So the first one we had earlier this month, we were talking really holistically about hiring and retaining talent. And there were tons of questions specific to hiring talent. So we wanted to really focus this next one on that topic. So that's what we're going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour or so talking with our panelists on, just getting some ideas. Of course, if you have to leave early, no worries. We will be sending out the full replay later to you folks. Also, there is a Q&A function. So please submit your questions as they come up. We will try to get to them during the conversation or at the end of the conversation. If we're unable to get to all of them, we will also make sure that we get you folks the answers once we do the recap blog later this week. So with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it on over to Heidi, who you all know and love. So she will be the moderator for today's conversation, where she will go ahead and introduce us to Ben, Brian, and Oded, who are our three panelists today as we discuss hiring talent within the moving industry. So Heidi, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Travis, for the quick intro. And thank you everyone for joining us live. For the past few years, I constantly hear about the driver shortage, and it's just becoming more and more, I guess, relevant, with the recession. And everyone I talk to in the industry is always telling me how much hiring and retaining movers and drivers and their admin is their biggest challenge. So today I want to dig deeper into the hiring process and explore how to identify and attract the best talent. I am honored to first introduce Ben Cross. Ben is the CEO of GLOMO, a recruitment firm supporting the global mobility industry. Ben has extensive experience in strategic planning, recruitment, and digital media, and has a passion for helping companies grow their business. Through GLOMO, Ben has been able to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and companies find the best talent and opportunities that will take them to the next level. Having been twice before, it's a pleasure to have the chance to reciprocate. Oded Carmi is based in Boston and is the president of DN Van Lines. He started the company back in 2001 with only one truck. Love his story. And they are now one of the largest, most reputable movers in Massachusetts. He is highly respected in the industry and is a leader in IAM's domestic asset-based mover group and the Massachusetts Movers Association. And last, we have Brian Brooks, last but not least. He's based in Columbus, Ohio, and is the president and co-owner of EE Ward Moving and Storage, the country's oldest continuously operating Black-owned business. He works to uphold the legacy of his godfather, providing reliable moving services and mentoring other entrepreneurs. Brian actively advocates for the entrepreneurial community to promote creativity and innovation. So I'm super excited for this conversation, and I want to just start off by learning more about each of you. I'd love to know, how did you get started in the industry? And Ben, I'm calling on you first.
Yeah. So I got the first job I could get out of college, and that was actually at the Pods call center in Carrollton, Texas. And basically you just had to pass the drug test, wear a shirt, and pass the typing test, and that's how I got that job. So I didn't start on a truck. That's probably not a surprise to most people that know me. So I kind of bring a little different angle to it. Always kind of came from a sales and service background into it, and kind of worked my way up from being on the phones, selling long distance moving through Pods, and later a pack rat, and then on to a North American agent in Michigan. So that's kind of how I came up in the industry, Heidi.
Very cool. Oded?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it. It wasn't actually 2001, it was 2006, believe it or not. So I graduated from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut in 2005. And then my first job out of college was working for Kaplan, which is like an SAT prep company. And after 6 months there, I realized that I was a very small cog in a big system. And no matter how much time and effort I put in, I didn't really have the opportunity for growth. And we're going to talk a little bit more about opportunity for growth later on. So I went and looked for a different opportunity. And back then, if you all remember, Craigslist was like the big place you would go and look for jobs, right? I lived at that time, and my parents, one of these college students that moved back in with their parents after college, and we were in Framingham, Massachusetts. And so I found a job on Craigslist that was like general manager of a moving company in Framingham. That only lasted 6 months because basically the company couldn't afford me. But at that point, I learned the ins and outs of the moving industry and wanted to start something on my own, and really grew it. Now we have locations in Massachusetts and Virginia and Florida. We've grown to be, one of the larger independent movers. We're unaffiliated with any band lines. And I've also taken a big leadership role in a lot of our associations. You mentioned Mass Mover Association. I'm currently the president of that. US DAB, which is a US Domestic Asset-Based Movers, was a group that Chuck Bailey and I founded at IM. I was formerly on the executive committee of IM, and I'm currently on the executive committee for ATA MSC. So super involved in the industry. I believe that we get a lot more accomplished together than we do when we're kind of just trying to compete and cut each other's throats. So there's a lot of times when I'm talking with people, I'm going to present on something. They always ask me, well, don't you feel that that's that's going to give your competitors a competitive advantage? Like you're giving your intellectual property away. I'm like, I really like the benefit of the entire industry is really what we're looking for. And when we all do better, we all do better together. So I'm an open book and happy to answer any questions on anything. And I'll pass it to Brian.
All right, thanks, Oded. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, I should say, depending where you are. Brian Brooks, EE Ward Moving and Storage. Got into the business actually in 2001. So prior to 2001, though, I worked in corporate America. I was on the sales and marketing side. And then this opportunity came my way where Eldon Ward, my father was actually his attorney for about 20 years, and Eldon was the great-great-grandfather of John T. Ward. And for about 50 years, Eldon was the one that ran and managed EE Ward Moving and Storage. In about 1995 or 96, Eldon started to step back from the business, and eventually in 1999, he moved out to Arizona. So there was really no succession plan for the business. Eldon was my godfather with the relationship that he had with my parents. Grew up knowing him, did not work in the business at all though, but knew the history, the legacy. At this point in time, the business was 120 years old. So a very long legacy, started in 1881. And I guess at my mother's urging, when she knew that they were gonna have to either sell or close the business, she said, you gotta take a look at it. So I did that. So I took a look at it and started looking at it in 2000. Eventually, a couple trips out to meet with Eldon, and we eventually came to terms in 2001. And it's been it's been a wild ride for 23 years. I mean, the company at that point in time, we were down to, there was four movers, 2 people in the office, and there were 5 trucks, but 2 that ran. So that, that's kind of like, that was the story, so we've definitely come a long way to now where we're obviously still in the Columbus, Ohio market, but we're also in Charlotte, where I'm at today. And then we're also in Raleigh as well. And a lot more than 2 trucks just running. So that's my story.
Very cool. So everyone has very diverse backgrounds, and I just want to jump right in. We're here to talk about getting talent. So how do you get talent in the first place? Where are you going to find movers and drivers? And let's first start off the conversation by talking about the movers and drivers, and then we will pivot to talking about admin and office staff. Does anyone want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I would say that I wish that there was one place where all the movers and drivers congregated.
It's called Facebook, right, Oded? Isn't that what it is?
That's actually a good point, Ben. And I think Facebook, as we talk into it, is actually a good resource. We've been able to, on the operations side, find some good people on Facebook. But I will say that it's more of a shotgun approach. There's a lot of different strategies that companies can take in order to recruit movers and drivers, and there's a lot of it that's old school, right? Creating a positive workplace environment and incentivizing employees to attract other employees, right? I mean, that's happening right now in our Virginia branch, where we are really just bringing people in from one person that comes in brings another person, or brings another person, which brings another person. But Facebook is really good. And I think Ben, I'm going to throw this back to you. So you say Facebook, immediately I think Facebook, I think about, what we call in the industry cash labor. Talk a little bit about where you feel there's an opportunity with cash labor on Facebook.
Well, I'll answer your question, but I'm also going to push back on you and ask the question differently and say, you're like, oh crap, I need to hire 2 drivers this week. Where do you go first, Oded?
I wish it would work like that. If it was drivers, you're probably not going directly to Facebook. Facebook is really a great, I think, I'll answer the own question that I posed to you. So what happens is that, there's a lot of moving crews on Facebook, right? And they are hot and heavy, just like many of us during the summer, right? Where they, they're booked out weeks in advance. But they, during the winter, they're really scrambling to try to, have enough business to survive. And so what we've had some success doing is, after developing a long-term relationship with the labor crews, start saying, hey, listen, well, we can give you, winter work, and we can give you year-round work, but you really need to come and work for us on a full-time basis. And it doesn't always work, because some of the reasons that people are, let's say, cash laborers is because they have, let's say, child support orders or things that they're trying to essentially stay on the radar for. But that's not for everybody, right? That rule doesn't mean that everybody that's a cash laborer is in that boat. And so we've had success bringing a lot of them on. But Ben, I got to be honest with you. If FMCSA or DOT ever heard us say, hey, we need a driver tomorrow, and we hire a driver and don't give him the road test, don't get his background, don't run his MVR, like, becoming a driver is you can't say I need a driver next week and get
I didn't say you skipped the background and the road test and the MVR and all that kind of. I'm saying you got to find a candidate. Where do you look? Brian, where's the first place you look? You got to hire a driver tomorrow, next week. Where are you looking for a candidate?
Doesn't everyone have like a vetted list of contacts to just reach out to? That's what I assume.
For drivers? No way.
They'd already be working there.
Yeah.
Brian,
No,
where do you look?
so
You go
Ben,
to other agents? Where are you going?
So to your point, if you have that immediate need, I mean, you're looking within. When I say within, you're looking for your own people, your own drivers, your own movers. As far as trying to, is there anyone that they think would fit our culture? Because to me, it's key about, and Oded mentioned it earlier about, if you, and I know it sounds cliche, but if you create a right culture where people want to be, they're going to tell other people and bring them with them. And that is true. I mean, I see a lot in our industry, where you have, cousins upon cousins or brothers and, all kinds of siblings working, on crews and whatnot. But no, we look a lot and rely a lot on our internal staff, our drivers. I had a driver come to me today and just said, I've got a guy I want to bring over. He used to work with me in another location. I think he would fit. But then I also have drivers say, hey, I know this guy, but he's not going to fit. He doesn't do what he doesn't, have the same level of customer service care and concern that we do and what we take pride in. But that's, that's just a short answer as far as if you're in a pinch, I think the black book in your pocket is going to be that's kind of most success that at least we have found.
Yeah, and it seems like, so the way I look at it, Oded, kind of answer the question that you kind of posed to me. The way I look at it is Brian, working at an agent, a van agent, who's looking for an over-the-road owner operator driver who has experience, who has his own power unit, all that, is kind of going to be looking to hire from another agency, whether it be blue, orange, yellow, green, whatever, another agency, because that's just the model that they fit into. Where I look at you, Oded, you tend to have an employee model. So you're looking to kind of grow your drivers from your foreman crew, your labor, your employee pool that you already have, and promote kind of from within. So you're looking for employees. They don't need to have a power unit. They don't need to have a CDLA. They can, you can go on, frankly, Indeed, post an ad, and get people who are looking to work and do hard work and have good work ethic and good customer service, and a clean background, and you can grow that driver pool organically. And, I think it's really interesting, and I want to highlight the different models. So Oded, you asked me the question, myself, and I'm not a skilled driver recruiter. I've done it before in the past. And the way where I went is because I was working for an agency who had an owner operator model. I went on Facebook. I went to, Mover Syndicate and Brotherhood and Sisterhood of Movers and Movers USA and Old School Movers and whatever. And I just put an ad out there saying, hey, on a post, competitive contract, come work for a great company, tons of national account business, hauling in the Great Lakes region, whatever. Try to kind of put it in there kind of punchy, whatever, and then see what I got. And unfortunately, that approach gets you typically not the best drivers, get you people that are looking to leave for a reason. They're having a conflict internally. Why are they having a conflict internally? Because they're not running right. Maybe they're in the hole. Maybe they feel like they're getting shorted. A lot of times they're not actually getting shorted. They just don't understand their contract. Whatever. They're just not always the best operators is what I found. So you'd bring on 6 and you'd lose 3. And then over the course of the next, year, you'd lose, 2 out of the other 3, and so a lot of heartache kind of goes with that. So I agree in that long-term approach. I think Brian kind of was advocating for where you're kind of, internal referrals for good people, because good people like to work with good people. So, but it's hard, I think. And if I was running a moving company myself, and I'll defer to the question we have that Travis is talking about. But Oded, I like your model, where you're taking these employees and you're promoting them and you're giving them a career path. And I think we have to do more of that.
Yeah, and so Ben, just to feed off that, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and people from the audience, if you can comment on this, is the issue more of how do we get people to submit applications, or is it more like how do we have people show up to interviews, and if they showed up to interviews and actually accept the job, actually show up on their first day? Because I think that the main problem that a lot of us have been finding is not necessarily just like how do you get people to submit applications. It's like you get 20 applications, 3 people show up to the interview, and then 0 people show up for the actual first day of the job. And so I think maybe we should transition the conversation to, well, once we get a person that applies, how can we increase the conversion ratio? Because I think that's really where the problem is. And Brian, I want to ask you, is that where you're finding your problem, or is it more like how do I just get any interest?
No, to that point, yeah, I think in the last 2 years, I never had so many people that we had interviewed multiple times or several times, and then accepted the job and didn't show up to the job. Again, we know the last 24 months have been kind of an anomaly. Where hiring is taking on a whole different pace. But one thing we try to do though is even, because let's be honest, most movers are they're smaller companies. They're not your Fortune 500s, but we do try to present them with the look and the feel of getting formal offer letters, going through a formal process, talking to an HR person, because we have a person that like an HR consultant who at least we put the people through that channel, so that at least there's one point of contact. Because let's just be honest, if your operations manager is trying to juggle between dispatching crews and hiring somebody and talking to people, there could be a lot lost in that whole communication strain. So, like I said, we found that we let everything run through our HR resource, just so that we know we're always staying in contact. We're never leaving any kind of like just dead zones, like they just didn't hear from us. Because I think that's a key thing too, when people, things might be moving along, all of a sudden it goes dark. And, then people say, well, are these guys legit? Is that really, are they going to really hire somebody? So we, again, to your point, yeah, finding them. And then once you find them, let them know that you have a very strong process of trying to bring them on board and introduce them and let them know more about your company, going through the whole hiring process.
Yeah, so what I took away from that was presentation, right? So like how you're presenting the company to the prospective employee. So it's like a two-sided interview, right? Like the person is interviewing with your company and you're trying to decide whether the person is the right fit for you, but your company is also interviewing with a person to see if like it's an attractive place for them to work for. And you know, if there's one thing that Ben Cross is good at, it's presentation. So I'm gonna kick the presentation idea to you. We discussed a little bit at the you know, the panel prep session that we had. So Ben, what do you think about the whole presentation during the process?
I think first of all, speaking of jobs, you're putting Heidi out of a job right now.
No,
Okay,
no.
Oded. But
I
but,
just
but you know,
actually
I
wanted-
respect the hustle. I respect
No,
the hustle, Oded.
let me
Can
jump
I
in
answer
because
Oded's question though? Because I think it's actually for once a valid
You're
question.
taking away
Go for
Heidi's
it, go for
job.
it.
Heidi, be quiet.
Go for it.
Okay, no. So basically, what I took away from what Brian said is you also have to have a good candidate kind of workflow, kind of candidate database, kind of candidate process too, because people are going to be reaching out to your organization. And let's be honest, these people are in the moving business for decades. They're going to be reaching out to your organization, and you have to keep their information and constantly be messaging them as well, and kind of get them, you know, to become familiar with your organization so that they're kind of kept warm. You need to keep them warm, right? Because we go
Very
through
true.
hiring phases. Yeah, you got to thank you. You got to nurture them, Heidi. Thank you so much, Heidi. You should be on the panel. You got to nurture these candidates, right? And be constantly messaging them, because right now may not be the right time for them to leave, but it might be the right time later. So I love what Brian said about that, because I talk to clients all the time. We're a recruitment firm, and I'll come across candidates sometimes who wanted to work at the company, applied online, never heard anything. I'll turn around and submit that candidate to them, to the owner of the company, and say, hey, I have a great candidate. They've already applied online. Do you want to still interview them? Can I present them to you? And they're like, yeah. They end up hiring them and paying me a fee for somebody who already applied on their website. Now, I'm sure that doesn't feel good for them, but at the end of the day, they need the person. But that's how broken oftentimes the hiring, the apply online, the careers page on your website, if you even have one, is. So I just want to bring that up to people. It's like you're leaving a lot of money on the table by not nurturing the candidates who are already interested in your firm. And the last thing I'm going to say, because Oded asked me to talk about presentation, is you have to always be advertising, not just for customers, but for your internal customers, for your employees, for your next employees. You have to basically make that as almost as much of a advertising push as you do for your customers. Because I think if we know one thing in the moving industry, especially in the military moving industry, and especially in the corporate moving industry, is there is enough business. You can get all the business you can service. And so you need to always be hiring, and you need to always be thinking about putting A players on your team. So you really need to focus your advertising almost more so if you are a corporate or military mover on advertising for employees versus even above advertising for clients.
Let's leave a breath for Heidi. Heidi, I have a different point, but you wanted to say something to Ben.
So I just wanted to ask, like, what part of the interview process do you think is the most crucial to making sure candidates end up showing up on time? I mean, I know that, or showing up to the interview, because obviously for the company to make sure they have a process in place and actually reach out, and, you know, I see those as, you know, that should be done. But are there any specific parts of the process you think that moving companies should kind of pay extra attention to?
Yeah, so that kind of threads into what I was going to talk about. And the other thing that Brian talked about was like the offer letter, right? And so in these type of panels, I find sometimes that, like, you know, you listen to people talk, you might get some ideas, but you don't get like a specific takeaway, like, hey, I should think about implementing this in my business. And so the one takeaway, and hopefully there'll be more that I would take away from this, and Brian mentioned it, is a formal offer letter, right? A person comes and interviews, you're going to offer them a job, an offer letter with your logo, with a job description, with a job title, listing all the benefits, the rate of pay, all of that, right? Because a lot of times, like, you'll talk with people and then they'll be like, oh, that company I don't think offers any benefits. I just interviewed them. They're just, you know, it's not on paper. They didn't see it. They don't know about it. So I would say that the difference in a company that does interviews and just calls a person or sends them a text and says, hey, you want to work tomorrow, as opposed to the company that's going to, and how do you laugh? That's literally the way that that's like, probably, I'd say more often than not, the way that it works in most companies. Having a formal offer letter, a PDF that you're emailing to the person the date after the interview, that's going to increase your conversion rate. So the takeaway is, the call to action for people that are listening right now, if you don't have an offer letter, sit down, design it, and begin utilizing it, and you're going to see your conversion rate begin to rise.
Yeah, that's a good one, Oded. And also I'm hiring 3 people starting in 2 weeks. And oftentimes that happens where they have to give notice or whatever. And I've been calling and texting these people at least once a week in the interim to continue to keep that warm, because I want to make sure they actually show up. If they don't show up, I'm kind of screwed, right? I'm sure that's how we all feel, right? So I want to make sure they're still on board. We're still good, right? How's things going in your life? Oh, you talked to the missus. Hey, did you do that thing you said you need to do before you're going to start? All that stuff needs to happen. So I think whatever, Heidi asked what the most important step is, the next step. I think we can't take any steps off. I think sometimes we think we got it, it's in the bag, we're going to move on. The next step is always the most important step. It's just like sales. Which part of the funnel is the most important part of the funnel, Heidi? The next part, right? So we just always get the next meeting and the next step. We got some really good questions coming in. Can we answer some of these questions? Timothy,
Yeah, I
Debbie,
was
Greg?
about to jump in. This is awesome. So why don't I'm actually going to start with the one near the end. It says, what is your favorite tactic? Because it ties into this conversation. What's your favorite tactic for educating your potential candidates about your culture and company, besides just referring them to your website? Is there a way that you speak to it or show? Yeah, go for it, Ben.
You got to create videos. I mean, unless you're trying to hire people who are 60 years old, create videos, like use your camera phone, like create a video that
videos of your company.
Yeah, testimonials from your current employees, shots of the warehouse and the working conditions. Like you're going to tell people, oh, it's great to work here, tons of opportunity. People are going to think you're full of crap, like, because you're the owner. Of course you say that, right? Like, you have to show people. You can't tell people, you got to show people. So I think videos is huge.
Nice. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
I mean, there's related questions about the I'd say structuring it, right? Like being more, I would say, trying to pre-outline what you're going to discuss in the meeting rather than having a flow of consciousness. And especially if it's like one of the person that in the question said, well, like, he's not the one or she is not the one conducting the interview. They're having their employees, right? Maybe an operation manager. So rather than just telling the operation manager, hey, go conduct the interview, perhaps you're giving them a guideline. So what we do is we have a set of like questions, right? We have like a questionnaire and then like a set of information that needs to be provided. So, it's not like what questions the interviewer decides to ask. It's already predefined, right? We're getting the same set of information for all the different applicants, and we're also giving them the same set of information. And I guess another idea, kind of like Brian said, like an offer letter, would be like a company benefit culture letter, where right at the interview, you can give them a letter and say, hey, look, this is what we do for our employees. We have a holiday party once a year. We do holiday bonuses. We pay our drivers X, Y, and Z. Like, just kind of highlighting the positive points of your company.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's your employer brand, right? So a lot of times we think about, and I think this was like how you go out and find your new customers, but how are you finding your new talent? And that employer brand is just as important, or it's a huge part of your total brand is kind of what I'm hearing. Brian,
Travis,
you were going to say
something. I want to add something on that last question too, because I'm going to push it from a little bit of a different angle, where it says, what's your favorite tactic for educating potential candidates? So obviously, yes, you want to do that. They get that education many times through the posts that we put out there, or the initial, I guess, kind of description of services, which is kind of like, it's an abbreviated version. And then obviously, I mean, and the website is a key part of that, but where we actually use this to our advantage is when that individual shows up, or we do the interview, and they don't know anything about our company. They don't know, that's like a huge red flag, because not only there's two things there. There's hiring, there's attracting and hiring people. There's also not hiring the wrong people too. And so that question to me makes me think about how we've had people that sometimes come and interview us, and even I've had them come on their second interview, and I say, hey, do you know when our company was founded? Just curious. And like they don't know that. And I mean, that's like one of the big things about our company. It's 142, it's 1881, John T. Ward. Like that's anywhere on the internet. If you just search E.E. Ward, it just pops up on Google. So I mean, we kind of use that. I mean, yes, it's educating, it's pointing them to the right direction, but it's also seeing, did they go and did they,
do
absorb
the
research any of that information? Because are we that way? I know, like, and you get a good feel like, okay, this is window shopping. I'm the 10th person on the list of job interviews this week.
I agree with Brian 100%. They should be obsessed with your company culture, your purpose, your story. Because if they're not, you're just one on a list, and they're not going to stick. They're not obsessed. They don't have purpose. They're not going to be that A player, employee. So, but I think the converse of that is you have to put your purpose and your story and all those things out there for people to latch on to, and you will end up attracting those kinds of people who are motivated by that. If you don't put anything out there and you're attracting these people, you have to ask yourself, well, why are they attracted to me? Am I, so anyway, I love what Brian's saying, and he does have a great story, and they should know it.
Ben, Travis, before you go to the next question, Ben said something that gave me like a light bulb moment, something that we don't even do, but it's like something that we can all do, which seems like really intelligent. And that is like, so Ben likened the follow-up process for review to the sales process, right? Where you're like, you talk with the customer, you give them a quote, right? Then you follow up with them like 3 days later, 2 days later, you're keeping it warm, right? So like as a person, their hire date is approaching or following their interview, you're following up with them. Well, we all have CRMs that do exactly that, right? That set tasks, that send follow-up emails at specific times. So why not integrate our hiring process into our CRMs? Like we can create a specific, workflow with, email templates that are specific to the hire. So you almost enter the hire in like a lead, right? Then you set the interview date, and then it sends them an email 2 days later automatically being like, hey, James, like, wanted to see if you had a chance to review your offer letter. And then 3 days later, and then once they accept it, you convert it to like the next status. Now it's saying, hey, just a reminder, you confirmed that you're going to be in 3 days from now. Hey, the night before. Yep, looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. I don't think a lot of us are doing that, but we really already have the in-house capabilities to do that. I'm telling you, my takeaway is when I get off this panel, I'm going to talk with my team and say, hey, let's set up a workflow for applicants. Why not?
That's what I do, Oded, and that's what recruiters do. Is their CRM is for candidates, just like your CRM is for customers. And you're 100% right. You can convert your HubSpot or your Salesforce or whatever you're using, probably, unless someone else gave it to you, you can convert it and do it that way. I think it's a good segue actually into Debbie's question about she's posting jobs for. Can we just we're moving on. Can we talk about Debbie's question right here? We are a small dedicated contract
please,
carrier.
I was like, please, these questions are great.
Seeking Class C drivers with experience on a 26-foot straight truck. Oded, that's your wheelhouse. For 2 weeks, I've been on Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Cal Jobs, etc., and not found one person with a clean department motor vehicle record or any experience in the moving industry. We are based in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the pool of qualified drivers is so minimal that I was wondering if I should go out of state and pay relocation experiences. Great question, Debbie.
I got this one.
Oded, you want to take it and I'll clean it up?
As Ben would always joke that if the price is right, I'll send 2 straight trucks to like Wyoming.
To Wyoming,
right,
because he did it. That's why I joke about it.
DMV Lines operates only non-CDL vehicles. We're over 100 units, and they're all non-CDL. So the Class C drivers question is like right in my wheelhouse. What I will say to you is, as you are aware, anybody with a driver's license, after they go through, a road test and a few other DOT required steps, can drive a non-CDL vehicle. In fact, right now, without all that stuff, if you're moving yourself, you can go and rent a 26-foot Penske and you can go ahead and drive it. Like there's no regulatory requirement for additional, CDL licenses. So the real way to get drivers is by not getting drivers in the first place, right? It's by getting people that are movers, right? That have a license, that then one day you say, they've proven themselves, they know your culture, they know what you do. And, 6 months into it, a month into it, you say, hey, you want to make more money? How about becoming a driver? So for us, a real great way to do that is we, college students during the summer, we get them, they help supplement our labor force. And then oftentimes either, their next summer when they graduate, we'll go and we'll say, hey, listen, you're a mover, you're making $19 an hour. How about $22 an hour to be a driver, whatever the rate may be. But so my strategy to you is do not look for drivers. Look for movers that can get back and forth to work because they have a car and an active driver's license, and then convert them into your drivers.
Great point, Oded. Grow drivers, don't hire drivers. Excellent point. Debbie, I need clarification. When you say dedicated contract carrier, You say contract carrier, are you a freight carrier or do you use contractors on 26-foot straight trucks, or are you employee based? I need to understand that. But while you go in there, Debbie, and hopefully can add that in the Q&A, I'm going to go in here and say, pick out another thing I see that's wrong in this process here. You are on Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and CalJobs. You are doing what's called passive recruiting. You're posting a job and you're expecting good candidates to come to you. Good candidates aren't looking for jobs. Good candidates have jobs. Good candidates are successful. You have to actively recruit them. And if you can't do it, you need to hire someone or a firm that can do it. Good candidates are minding their own business, cranking out overtime, okay, and then spending a little bit of time with their family if they have it, okay? So you need to be on their phone, in their DMs, in their texts, whatever, and you need to be targeting them and recruiting like you would be doing with a sales process. So do not think that if you are posting a job, you are doing your job. You need to go out and hire a recruiter who specializes in driver recruitment or this kind of job recruitment, or you need to have somebody on your staff, an internal person, HR, whatever, but someone with a sales focus. Okay, because some people think internal recruiters are the same as external recruiters. Internal recruiters recruit passive candidates and post jobs and sort through resumes they get and have to sift through all the Costco cashiers and try to find somebody that can load a truck. It doesn't work that way. You have to go out and you have to actively recruit people. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to know where to look. Okay. They may be on Indeed, they may be on ZipRecruiter, but you know how many job postings there are for 26-foot Class C drivers probably on Indeed? What makes yours stand out? You probably just copy and pasted somebody else's job description and put it up there. It literally doesn't stand out at all. So you have to go start to use these tools. Like LinkedIn is a great tool, but it's not great for this type of job. Facebook is a great tool if you're in the right groups. But a lot of them are contractors if in the moving industry. So you might find a freight, one or something like that. The thing I would say is you need a Zoom info, which is I pay $16,000 a year for Zoom info. But for Zoom info, you can actually look up people's contact information, their email, their phone numbers, and you can get busy like that. So, or you can again hire a recruiter.
I didn't realize how common it was to hire drivers and then promote them, or hire, let's say, just movers and then promote them into a driver. But for a company that's not doing that at all today, it seems like a very big step to have to then train and go through that. So are there
So
any...
let's ask Debbie though. She says they're all employee based. Thanks for the tips. No problem, Debbie. So what's the have you tried Oded's promotion idea and growing drivers? I mean, is your problem hiring drivers or is it hiring movers? You might just need to hire more movers. And are you having problems with that, Debbie? Or have you waited too long and now you need them now and you haven't been growing the pipeline? I'm so curious about that.
Yeah, and on top of that, Heidi, to answer your question directly, we're talking about non-CDL drivers. Non-CDL drivers primarily are more local drivers, right? They're drivers that we're a little unique, but we'll send our trucks anywhere. But most local drivers are working within 150-mile air radius. And so, for that, you don't really, it's not that big of a step, right? It's really simple, right? Because like I told you, those people like you, Heidi, right now, if you needed to move and you didn't want to pay a moving company, you would go to U-Haul, you go to Penske, you go rent a truck and you drive it yourself. So it's not that big of a step. When you're talking to driving a tractor trailer, a CDL, that is really a big step, right? That requires a significant investment. It requires going to school. It requires taking a pretty significant driver test, and then it requires a lot more regulatory compliance afterwards, right? Like non-CDL drivers, they're not subject to a DOT drug testing policy. There's no IFTA tax requirements. They're just, if they're operating with a 150-mile radius, there's no logbook requirements. So it is a huge step between being a local non-CDL driver and being a CDL driver. And Brian's, most of his guys are the CDL drivers, and that he can tell you that's a long path.
Is this Debbie Hill from HD Logistics? I'm really curious. It looks like they're a logistics, commercial and industrial moving specialist. So she may not need as much helpers as she needs, drivers. Not exactly sure. I need to understand more about that, but you may need to look at a freight recruitment solution or freight job board.
So Somewhat, well, it is unrelated, but maybe not, I don't know. So the next question I'm going to hit is moving business is seasonal, which we all know. So what is the best approach for hiring summertime help that you don't necessarily need to keep on during the winter? Is there a different approach? Should movers think about that differently?
We talked about this in the
Brian, what do you
Brian,
think about
take it.
that one?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, no, that's a great question. And again, we many times look internally, not for the help, but to, so think about this. There's people in your company that, maybe they have children who are school age or seniors in high school or college age children. I mean, that pipeline of getting to those kids that are typically, might be graduating from high school or coming home from college. And those are great. And I know that you always hear that, but those are great pipelines for getting people that want seasonal work. We've posted at your local colleges, but that seems to be, those are people that are definitely looking. I'll tell you another, we've been lucky with getting people who are like our bus drivers for school systems, because those folks are off in the summer.
There you go.
So it's looking at those industries are, and here's another one, like teachers. There's some teachers, there's some teachers who, they don't work in the summer.
Brian, that's such a great point. Chuck White, the president of IAM, was a teacher and bus driver in the Maryland area before he became a mover, and now was the president of the association.
Right. So no, so it's kind of looking at those, when we talk seasonal, it's looking at those that are kind of opposite of us in season, so to speak. So those are some places that we've been successful in looking.
Yeah, so I have a different view on this completely. We talked about this in the prep meeting. I don't actually look at our industry from a capacity standpoint, at least for us as being seasonal. It's the rates that are seasonal, right? Like we stay busy year round, but we made a conscious decision to basically run, spinner tires, right? Like do work and maybe not make a profit, but in the long term, we are making a profit, right? Because we're able to grow our operation to capture more of the profitable summer work. So my advice to everybody is that, some of us, we get like, our rate is $200 an hour for 2 men in a truck, and any less than that we won't take. And when we stick to that during non-peak, it's the reason why we don't have a lot of work, right? But if we're willing to operate at thinner margins or no margins in order to keep our staff, to bulk up our staff, that's going to benefit us during the winter. And the other thing is, it's really strange, and I mentioned that to you, I mentioned that to you, Brian and Ben, during the prep meeting, is that like we run at capacity both summer and winter, yet our capacity goes down during the winter. And I always go to our operation managers and our dispatchers, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, we have work for 50 guys. Like, why are we only able to staff 40? And I think that in this moving industry, there is already some of the people that are involved in the labor side, they already have like this mental thing where I'm going to work my butt off during the summer and make my money, and I'm taking the winter off. And it has nothing to do with how much work there is. Everybody's an hourly employee for us. They're making the same amount of money in the summer as they are in the winter if they work the same amount of hours. It just is like natural kind of mentality, and I don't know what it is, but I think that helps contribute to the kind of like the capacity going up in the summer and down during the winter.
Oded, I think you make a great point about, I love what you said about I think you said like the demand isn't cyclical, our rates are cyclical, and how much money we can get for 2 men in a truck is cyclical, right? I think that another thing, and I like what you said about kind of getting scrappy in the wintertime, lowering your rates, whatever. I do think you have an advantage as an independent employee-based moving company, because a lot of the van line agents out there have contractors, and in that contract there are 4-hour minis. There are 4-hour minis, and you're doing a 60-40 split with your terminal contractor. And if you say, you know what, instead of doing $50 an hour or $70 an hour plus a $25 truck fee, $75 per man per hour plus a $25 truck fee or something like that per hour, which would get you in that, 125 to 150 and, for 2 men in a truck, per hour. I'm going to go down to, I'm going to get real scrappy. I'm going to go down to $25 or $30 per man per hour plus a $25 truck fee. The contractor would just say, I'm not doing it. I'm not getting out of bed for it, and that's a problem, right? As an employer, you can say, listen, Jimmy, I'm paying your $18 an hour and your healthcare, get the hell out there and load the damn truck. Right. And that's a whole different conversation, So I think that because we also have to realize our terminal contractors are also middlemen, right? So now the agent gets the business, and they sub it to the terminal contract. Well, the terminal contractor turns back around and hands it to a driver and a helper of his own that he's paying on an hourly basis. So I think when you look at your employment structure, and when we have some of these limiting beliefs out there around how we can hire, how we can staff, and what we can do, we also have to look at the environment that we created and take ownership as owners and leaders of companies and say, is my business model, which has served me really well for many years, is it inhibiting my growth in the future? And I think you might find that to be the case in some situations.
Good point.
Yeah, like how do you incentivize everyone to be a team player?
How do you stay nimble and responsive to market forces? You know,
it's a really good point about just being nimble. And what Greg actually commented on this commented on this topic as well. Like firemen, also a great source. They work 2 or 3 days on and then several off. So that could also be a really great source for you for drivers, because many of them do have CDLs. So I know there's a couple other questions that Heidi has teed up, but I do want to get to Timothy's really quick, because it was one of the first questions that came through. And so I want to make sure I understand it, Timothy, but are there different recruiting strategies for hiring multi-generational employees? So I don't know if you're talking about, people across different generations, like younger movers versus older movers, or people that are kind of within a family that moving just kind of runs deep in their blood.
I think across generations, I think is how I interpret it. Timothy, feel free to add a clarifier there, but I think he's saying, how do I hire, young people, older people, seasoned, like, how do I mix all that together? And are there different strategies or tactics for each?
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. Who wants to take that one?
The question is hard. I mean, I think that if you're looking at people of different generations, maybe the way you advertise and market to them is different. Like somebody who's 25 years old might respond better to Ben's strategy of hitting them up in their DMs and stuff like that, where somebody who's maybe in their early 50s is probably going to be might not even have social media. So I think your kind of recruitment and outreach strategy is going to be different. When it's multi-generational employees within your company, and what I'm saying is when you have a father whose son is potentially able to work for you, I think it really just comes down to really treating the parent well, right? If the parent is really proud of the organization and feeling happy, they're going to want their offspring to join the team, right? Where if they have a lot of doubts, they're probably going to be like, Johnny, I work really hard so you could have a better life, because my life is awful and I don't like working in this company. So don't come and work for us. So I think, going back to presentation, I think this is really important. Moving and storage is not like a sexy or glorious industry. Like we're not thought of like.
I disagree, Oded. I mean, have you looked at this call? I mean,
that's a good point.
I think we're changing that.
But I'm saying,
smiling too.
I'm saying we're not jet pilots, we're not rocket scientists, we work in a labor-based industry, a blue-collar industry. But I still think that putting the trappings of kind of a larger organization and giving people pride in what they do is a key part of the organization. So giving people proper titles, proper uniforms, recognizing them on a regular basis, because I think a lot of the complaints from many people in operations is you only talk to me when something bad happens, right? But all the good that I do is never recognized. So I think that's really circles back to the pride and culture. So if you have, let's say, a father who's got, his title has changed over time and is treated very professionally and looks at the organization as a really professional place and a place where one can grow, then they're going to want their children to be involved with that. And if they look at it as a dead end and a low end job, they won't. So that is one thing that I would recommend thinking about.
Brian, do you have a comment on that? Because I got a thought on that too.
You can go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I take this a little different. I think when he says multi-generational, I don't think he means from the same family. I think he means, how do we hire young people in an industry where there's been a lot of older folks, and how do we appeal to different generations and have have a multi-generational workforce? And I think some of these problems are made up in our own mind, like kids these days, when it turns out kids these days are just growing into the adults that they've always been, and same motivations. I think we do have to speak to people's motivations at where they are in life. I think that people who have families who are older and closer on the back nine of their career may have a different motivation set than people who are 22 have. I do believe that young people like to be spoken to in terms of their purpose. They like to be seen for their individuality. And I think you have to acknowledge that. And I think that it's oftentimes we try to put these square pegs in round holes, and people just say, you know what, I'm not feeling it, I'm out. They're going to opt out of that, right? And I don't think we can blame younger generations for opting out. If we want them to be a part of our workforce, we have to meet them where they are. Okay, they are our internal customers. We have to design somewhere that they can be successful, and that's on us as leaders to do that. I think there's enormous opportunity to do that. I think we need to reframe what we do. I mean, Oded starts out with the moving's not sexy. You know, I think that, I mean, we all laugh about that, but I do think that we have an opportunity to reframe that. I think it's hilarious when we see companies come into our space who are startups, who are tech companies, who are offering a solution where you can take your stuff that you don't want, and we will come to your home, we'll take it away and we'll store it for you, and then we'll bring it back to you when you're ready. And they're getting these crazy big valuations, and they're considered a tech company when in reality they're a moving and storage company, and they're just branding it different than it's been branded before. And they have this crazy valuation, right? So we have to look at how are we presenting ourselves? Are we presenting ourselves as a rusty, arthritic industry, or are we presenting ourselves as a huge growth opportunity where you can make six figures before you're 30 years old and, you know, have a great career in this and do something interesting and talk to people and get out of the office, right? And get exercise, you know? So I think we have to really look at the way that we brand ourselves and frame ourselves.
On that same, on that multi-generational aspect that you were speaking of, Ben, I agree. I think what I'm hearing you say is, you know, you sometimes have to, you can't treat everybody the same because there's different needs. And I think about there's skill and there's will. And I think about someone who's younger is like, hey, I'm just, like you said, I'm trying to get to the top. I'm trying to, the sky is the limit for me. But then someone who might be, you know, older is like, okay, they have huge amounts of skill, expertise, but they, you know, maybe it's a different set of work hours. Maybe it's a different, you know, workload that you give them, or, you know, you have to be, I think, creative in how you know, to go back to the question of how do you hire across generations, is you can't treat everyone the exact same when they're coming from different generations like that.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. And I think if we look at companies who have done a great job of recruiting high potential young people like out of college or whatever, and everybody doesn't have to come from college, obviously, but I'm just thinking about this. I think Enterprise Rent-A-Car. You know, I don't know if they're still doing an amazing job with this, but they were doing an amazing job of pulling some really great people out of college, high potentials, and making them wash cars and wear a coat and tie on a car lot and upsell people for insurance. And they were doing a great job of getting people to do it because they were able to articulate what the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan was. And there was a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. And if you could stay on that crappy rainbow for long enough, you were going to get a pot of gold. And I don't think that we as an industry can articulate what that career path is for a high potential 22-year-old coming out of college who says, hey, I majored in a liberal arts education, or I was an athlete or whatever, and I don't really have a career path. I'm a hard worker. I'm open-minded. I want to make some money. I want to do some stuff, and I want to have purpose in my job. I don't think we can speak to that candidate very well as an industry today.
So yeah, some great conversation. Heidi, I think you've got one more question. So
I was going to say, so there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity for moving companies to create a career path and then present it to that company. And that way that will, you know, hopefully give, you know, whoever you're talking to just some motivation to not only join, but be motivated as they continue to work for your company. And I just wanted to add a good question to ask, I think, during interviews to understand exactly what will attract them to your company is, what are you looking for in your next role? So you can ask the person directly, and hopefully they're describing a culture that is, you know, that is yours or something similar, or then you can speak about how your company is that, or, you know, at least, you know, give them some specifics so that they understand, like, well, you know, you're describing our company and we'd love to have you here. And then that would make them feel
yeah.
Really
Can I give a specific about this? I actually was touring I was touring a Stewart Moving and Storage of Midlothian, Virginia, right? They're a large independent hauler on the East Coast, do a lot of military, former ARPAN agent, long time ago, switched over to being independent, have grown tremendously since. I was walking their warehouse, their headquarters outside Richmond, probably 7-8 years ago. And I don't think it was like the break room or the driver lounge or whatever. On the wall was the career path, right? And it's like lumper, you are here, right? And then you go to like, from seasonal lumper to like helper, mover 1, mover 2, foreman, driver, over the road local driver, over the road driver, operations manager, then you go to sales, you can go to GM or what, and every path was like, here's what you need to know, here's the certification, our internal training you got to go through, how many hours, how many, every step of the way. And so people knew transparently, here's the path, here's where I need to go, and here's where I'm at on the path. And if I do the things on the wall, I can be here. And if I'm not getting there, it's not a secret why I'm not getting there. So I think that's the level of transparency that we need to have. And I think our people, deserve that if we're going to recruit the best ones.
Yeah. All right. I'm just going to wrap it up with one last question. COVID has really been changing the way we work. So curious on your thoughts on having employees in office versus remote versus hybrid. And I'm very curious because it's different for every industry. In the tech industry leans towards hybrid. And so, I want to know like what kind of standards are you setting at your companies?
I can start with that. So we're definitely not talking about movers and drivers because those cannot work remotely, unfortunately.
Or every day they work remotely. They're out in the house, right?
I guess that's a good point.
Maybe it's a hybrid. Show up at 6 a.m. and then go to a house.
Yeah, maybe one day they'll be piloting robots. We're not there yet. What I will say for office employees is that I think a lot of employers really had a negative impression or negative outlook on remote working. It's natural, right? You don't see the person there. You don't know what they're doing. And COVID forced us to reconcile our opinions with that because we all had to experience some level of it. And what I really found is that I think a productive employee is going to be successful both in an in-office and remote environment. And a non-productive employee is going to fail pretty hard in a non-office environment. And so there might be, there's a little bit of an advantage there because I think that when you have an employee in the office, you're not really kind of monitoring their production as much, right? They're in the office, you see them, they're at their desk, so they must be doing work, right? Where when they're working remotely, like you don't see that. So all you have to base it on is the results. And so you might find yourself more quickly coming to an assessment that somebody isn't the right fit when they're working remotely, when it's the same quality person as being in-house. There is something to be said of collaboration and culture, and there's a lot of different, apps and technology products that have helped bring us together, even in a remote environment. I still love in-house, in-person attendance. With that said, some of my most productive employees are fully remote employees. So my mind is now open to it, even though my instinct still tells me, no, it's bad. But I've learned from experience.
Heidi, I'll go next. So one thing that I think was a little advantageous to us is that we fell under an essential business category as far as movers. So we were not people that just had to turn the sign that says closed and just everybody has to go home. So, a lot of us it was just business as usual, obviously with a lot more safety concerns. And, what we did do is we 6 feet apart or people, separated, mask and, sanitizer. So, but we did keep, we kept working through that, from my experience. And we had people prior to COVID that were working remotely. So it wasn't really that new to us. We embrace it. But what I will say is everybody cannot work remotely. They think they can, but they can't. It's not for everybody. It's, so that's, to his comment about, motivated people, but even still, there's some people who I think just, they have to be honest with themselves that they thrive better in a setting where there's people, there's interaction, there's synergies, there's idea sharing. And so, what I do think though, is that COVID, it definitely as far as in our company, it forced us to use technology a lot more. We're better for it now. Like we're better because we do integrate technology a lot more and video technology than we did prior to it. So I'm grateful for the fact that I think it kind of pushed us faster down a path that we wouldn't have gone so fast. Because even like what's most common is like in our world was a virtual survey world, which was, that was like big resistance, prior to COVID. Then when COVID came, in every salesperson who resisted virtual, trust me, they figured it out really quickly because it was their only means to be able to sell because they weren't going in homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to be careful when we talk about this and talking about like in terms like using a broad brush and in terms of a company policy around this, right? We have to say there's different types of expectations for different types of workers, right? And a mover has to report to the office each day. An accountant might work from home 5 days a week, and a salesperson might only come in when they have to submit estimates or talk to, the back office or whatever. So I think that we have to be very careful with that, because if you say everyone's got to be in office or hybrid 3 days a week, you will lose out on transformative hires who don't happen to live in Boston or in Columbus and who could change your business. And Oded is a perfect example of that with Janet Turner, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have to be very careful about speaking in generalities and these big things. The other thing I would say is don't say we don't have virtual people and therefore, we don't need to invest in technology. To Brian's point, we use a virtual office platform called Wonder, and it's free. And we check in there. So all of our people who aren't with us in person are on Wonder all day long, and we meet there virtually. So I think that's important as well to reiterate.
You meet in the metaverse.
But
Meet in the
Ben,
metaverse.
there's one thing that you didn't talk about. You mentioned Janet Turner, and that's like hiring not based on what position is available, but hiring just on general talent and making it work. You want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a big football fan, right? And so when the draft rolls around every year, it's like, are we going to hire for positional need, or are we going to hire best available on the board, right? And I'm a big best available kind of person, right? I'm also a big fantasy football player, right? And my favorite fantasy football podcast guy says, your team's biggest need is great players. So don't worry about if you got to need a quarterback, because there's going to be an injury or something's going to happen, right? And so good people can always depart the business, but it's important to always be putting A players on your team. So if you have the good fortune of having an A player who wants to come work at your company, regardless of whether or not you have a need, quote unquote, for them open, you need to hire that person, because they're not going to be around when you need them. So you need to actually take advantage of that. It's been the case for me. I've hired people that I didn't think I needed or had openings for, and they just, what that's called? That's called a strategic hire. All right. That's called, we're going to grow, is what that's called, because now you're being proactive, you're planning, and that's how you become successful. If you're reactive and you're only plugging holes that are leaking in your ship, you're not really getting anywhere, are you? So I really encourage people, if you have money in the bank, hire people you don't think you need, but you acknowledge are exceptional, transformative, top 1% A players.
Yeah, Ben, that's exactly, you said it perfectly. The idea is, if you have somebody who's really talented, but you don't have a particular position, what I found is you hire them, and a year later, they've carved out a role for them, and a really important role, right? So again, I think a lot of us are like, well, we can never find talent because we're specifically looking for, a box for this person, for a particular person to fit in a particular time, when we have a lot of other opportunities that we're just not taking advantage of. So again, best available, draft best available. That's what we're saying, right, Ben?
Yep, 100%.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to close it off. We are definitely a little bit over time, but thank you guys so much for coming together for this roundtable. It's been so insightful. Oded has some takeaways. Ben, always learning. Brian, cover letter. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being on here with me, and hope that everyone else that's tuning in was able to learn a lot as well. And with that, this roundtable was brought to you again by Supermove, and we're bringing your whole team to one system and make it as easy as possible to run your business with moving software. So if you're not using any moving software at the moment, feel free to check out our website and check out our demo. You can mention that you attended this roundtable discussion with Oded, Brian, and Ben. Travis, I don't know if you have any last words.
Promo code? Is there a promo code? They should
No
reference?
promo
Okay.
code. Maybe
All right.
the word multi-generational family, which means hiring a whole entire family all at once. But yeah, thank you guys
If
all
you
for
don't
attending.
put the hyphen in the promo code, it won't work though. So you got
There's no-
multi-hyphen
there's no-
generational.
Multi-generational. Yeah, no, that is all. Thank you guys all for attending, and you can look out for our next event by following us on social media. Thank you guys so much.
Hey,
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Been great. See ya.
See ya.